Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next City of Echoes chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 11, which is the last chapter in part 1. We go into part 2 of the story after this. Now admittedly it's not a huge kind of transition ultimately, in that, like I kind of said before, they probably could have chosen a moment from some of the last couple of chapters to maybe end part 1, and it might have flowed just a little bit better, but this is technically the end of part 1. I will mention at the start, I do have YouTube channel membership and Patreon available if you'd like to help support the channel, and it's also a way for you to gain access to early access to other videos in this series. But yeah, let's jump in here with chapter 11. So we actually continue on from the end of the last chapter, which was like right in the middle of Jin talking to Susu. It felt like it was maybe the end of the conversation, but it was just kind of the reveal that, like, oh, she doesn't know who I am. She's acting like she just is someone completely different. Like, it's Susu, but it's not Susu. So obviously we know it's Dai Li brainwashing, of course, but Jin, of course, doesn't know that. She has no foundation to really think that ultimately. So where we start here is she kind of continues to try and kind of push in terms of like, hey, you know, is something wrong? Tell me what's going on. She's beginning to create a little bit of a scene. She didn't want to create a scene, but more and more people are beginning to realize that, like, oh, one of the cultural ambassadors is kind of being harassed, and some of the guards begin to come over. And of course, because they're so polite, like Susu Judy is kind of like, oh, there's no need for you to do anything, guard. This girl just lost her way, right? And Jin realizes, like, oh yeah, I better get out of here. I want to say more to her, but clearly it's not going anywhere. And she just apologizes pretty quickly and goes to leave. And she finally kind of gets out of course. She gets out of she had to go through kind of like a checkpoint to get into the university. She finally comes out of that checkpoint and meets up with Xuan. So at this point, I've listened to some of the audiobook. That's the pronunciation of his name, Xuan, that they use in the audiobook. It's almost like a SHWEN, which is a little bit kind of counterproductive given that it's UAN, but like that's the best I can get from the audiobook is like Xuan. So I'm going to go with that just for ease of use. So they meet up again, and he immediately asks, hey, why did you take so long? Because she took the extra time to speak to Susu. So they quickly kind of get out of there, not wanting to bring more attention on it, because it still is this kind of criminal underworld kind of package delivery. So they can't really stick around and get that kind of figured out overall. There's an interesting moment here where they get back to the kind of apothecary. Jin goes to give the coin that Professor Ohm gave her to Xuan, but he's like, no, that's yours, you know, like, you're doing me a favor here, take it. And she's like, oh wow, that's so nice, basically. She apologizes, you know, I got distracted. He kind of apologizes for maybe being a little bit harsh with her. He's just risk averse, of course, in this situation. She comes close to just revealing what exactly happened and kind of opening up a more positive foundation of friendship with Xuan here, but she kind of stops herself. It's a very interesting thing, which she says, for a moment I consider telling him about Susu to show him that I'm not as Jiang said I was, loveless and lonely. But then I remembered the way Susu looked at me today with complete indifference. Jiang may be right after all. My heart hardens again. I don't need them to like me. I can't believe I considered telling him something personal they could use against me. And someone calls out to Xuan then, and she just kind of leaves. Like, while he's distracted, she just kind of leaves into the crowd and gets away from there. And it's a very interesting one because it highlights how kind of impactful that scene with not just Xuan, but like Jiang and Renda. That's the pronunciation on his other friend's name. It's Renda. But anyway, that has had an impact on her. And she's kind of almost like leaning into it now. Like, if that's how they think I am, then that's how I'm going to be. I don't need to become friendly with these people, like, at all. And you can tell that the negativity surrounding the whole Susu situation is really beginning to kind of take root in Jin here. And that's what we continue to do as the chapter progresses, of course. So she makes her way back home. We find out that this is actually one of Gong Gong's good days. So he's trying to be like, hey, what happened to you? Why are you so upset? She just kind of explains that, like, no, everything's going okay. Like, we're doing well. They're paying me fairly. That sort of thing. She doesn't want to burden him with anything else. She then immediately kind of goes and says, like, oh, I have another delivery to make, even though she doesn't. So what she then does is she makes her way to Pao's tea house again. So this is, of course, where Mushi and Lee, Iroh and Zuko are. And interestingly, we get this unique scene here where it's actually Jin having a conversation with Mushi, so with Iroh here. So this, we didn't see this in the show, but obviously it was sort of implied that, like, she had been to the tea shop a lot, and this is just an unknown conversation that we are getting here in the book. So she sits down, she gets a cup of tea, Mushi serves it to her, and when she looks up into his eyes, like, she's so upset about everything that's happened here, it begins to kind of come out, and he immediately sees that and kind of realizes, like, oh, I need to go into advice mode here. So kind of Iroh, like, sits down to kind of think with her, and he's like, hey, try to drink the tea, it'll make you feel better. And she goes to, like, gulp it down, and he's like, whoa, slow down, you're meant to savor your tea, not just pour it down your throat, basically. And she makes a few connections here. She's just like, this man is close to Gong Gong's age, and I've always learned to be respectful to my elders, so I listen to what he has to say. So she does finally take his advice. She slows down, actually drinks the tea, assesses the taste of it. And we note here at this point that, like, the tea is impressive. I'm used to tea being hot and bitter, but this tastes light and green with a lingering aftertaste of flowers. His grin widens as he gives me an enthusiastic nod, gesturing to drink more. So this is the best tea in the city at this point, and Jin is obviously really realizing that, like, effectively for the first time here, being directly served by Iroh here. So yeah, he goes off again. She gets to kind of just see what's happening in the tea shop. We get an interesting sense of, like, how the tea shop has changed, because of course she's been to Pao's before Iroh and Zuko joined, and now she can see that, like, hey, Manager Fung is actually smiling as he's bringing out the tea to other people. He's not wearing his typical scowl. And she immediately kind of connects the dots that, like, oh, it's because of Iroh primarily that this is happening. He's changing things for Fung and her, kind of, as we see in this scene. So he comes back over and is like, hey, are you enjoying the tea? Yes, sir. They continue to have kind of a conversation. He says, tea is like life. It's meant to be savored. She kind of counters this with sort of the idea that, like, oh, that's only an upper ring thing. You know, that really doesn't, like, apply to kind of me, does it? He just kind of says, you know, you're too burdened by life for one so young. You should be out in the city with your friends, doing things that young people do. But she's like, nah, that's just for the upper ring people. And he then gives an interesting kind of pearl of wisdom from his own life. You don't believe me that, you know, this is what you should be doing, and you can do it too. Well, let me tell you this. I may not look like it, but once I lived a life where I only needed to snap my fingers and I would get what I wanted. I had power, I had wealth, but I didn't understand how little it was all worth until I lost the one thing that was most important to me. And it's fascinating here because he doesn't reveal the details. We know that this is him talking about Lu Ten. He only realized when he lost Lu Ten that the rest of it didn't really matter. And so what's so important about Iroh at this point in time is that he kind of has that with Zuko. Iroh could absolutely settle down, have a normal life in Ba Sing Se. But it's Zuko who's the one who's so all over the place about his destiny versus the potential for a more simple life. But for Iroh, this is everything he wants, just kind of being here with his nephew type thing. So really interesting piece of advice, just highlighting that contrast between, like, you know, Crown Prince Iroh, everything going well, versus just the loss of his son, and the rest suddenly was not important anymore. Then he pats his round stomach and is like, this is the only thing that remains of that good life, and I'm certain we will have happiness here in Ba Sing Se. As long as we have hope, we can keep going. And this is ultimately the advice that he gives to Jin, is just to kind of maintain positivity. Don't overly focus on the negativity. Keep in mind there is still hope. Don't lose yourself to the negativity. In a way, kind of like Zuko is doing. He's kind of warning her to kind of not go down that same path as well. Zuko walks by with a tray of pastries. He grabs one, puts it down next to her, of course. They kind of go off. He says the pastry is kind of, it's on him for indulging an old man in conversation. And she has this realization as he goes off that, like, I'd been so foolish. Her interpretation of Susu is that, like, oh, she was probably trying to make the best of her circumstances to build a new life. She was probably protecting me by just ignoring me, because it probably would have gotten her into trouble if she had in any way given the indication that she knew me or anything like that. What I should be doing is kind of what I promised her to do, and that is taking care of her family and then finding a way to make money so I can, you know, buy out her contract and bring her home. Like, actually focusing on making stuff happen rather than just the negativity of everything going on. We do get the fun detail that the dessert is a mung bean cake shaped like a pai sho tile that has the image of a jasmine flower on the top. And it's perfect with the tea. She leaves a coin behind for Iroh and his advice. And yeah, a tiny tendril of hope blooming in my heart as she kind of leaves the tea shop. So this advice has worked quite well for her. So this is where we end part 1 of the book, like I said, with sort of the idea that, like, we get the whole intro scenario. Susu takes the contract in the upper ring. We get the initial kind of Jin does a brief mission for the Silver Fangs, but then the negativity of it all hits her, but then the positivity begins to come back with just some Iroh advice. And the idea is that, okay, we're going to probably get to see a more direct, focused Jin really trying to accomplish something going into part 2 and see where we go from there, of course. But yeah, it's a very fun chapter just because, like, you know, it's in a way like the big Iroh scene in the book. I don't think there's too many more Mushi scenes here. So this is the kind of big one of, like, Jin actually did have a brief Iroh advice session over tea, which makes a ton of sense ultimately. But again, we still have to get to the date with Zuko, and that will be coming up soon-ish, but there's a few chapters to go before we get there. But yeah, there's the Iroh scene, but then there's also the ending of, like, the first part of this chapter as well. The idea of she was about to tell Xuan, like, the whole situation with Susu, about to kind of open up to him because, hey, they had this positive interaction. He gave her this job that earned her a decent bit of money. And after it all came to a head, like, he was nice, he let her keep the kind of extra money. She just closed up because of the previous kind of chapters, and it was meant to signify the idea of the negativity kind of taking hold and then the positivity coming back because of the Iroh Mushi scene. So interesting section here, but we'll move on to chapter 12 and onwards into part 2 in the next video. But yes, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this chapter. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.